All right, welcome back to eBay Scavengers. I'm Mikey, and with me today is Jay.
Hey.
Hey, and today we are going to talk about where to buy. So this is where we buy our crap to sell on eBay. And Jay usually takes offense at me for calling it crap, but
Come on, we got to have some standards here, you know?
yeah.
I mean, I really think, too, that this topic is almost like the easiest topic because, like we've said before, there is so much stuff in this country. It's very easy, and I see it. It's a amateur people who just start out. It's their problem when they just buy too much stuff. It's so easy to go outside to stores or auctions or thrift stores, and you just get a carload of stuff, and you bring it home, and you just drop it in the middle of the floor, and you just do that day in and day out, and suddenly you have a whole house full of stuff, and you're probably on one of those TV shows called Hoarders. So, yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, we'll come back to the hoarding one. That's a whole episode
Yeah,
of
that's
not
true.
listing what you buy and sitting on it. So, Jay, I know that you and Ryan, when you guys go out, thrift stores are huge for you guys. You probably, of the merchandise you sell on eBay, how much of it do you think is picked up from thrift stores?
Well, we went through kind of a period where all we did was shop at thrift stores because that's just where we knew to go because we were just focusing on clothes and shoes. And so that was 100% of our stuff. And then we started going to auctions, and then we went to yard sales. Now I would say 60% of our stuff comes from yard sales, and then, maybe it's 40% from thrift stores.
Right. Now, you have auctions in there, too. So what part is that?
Yeah, auctions, we got to have a love-hate thing with auctions. I'd say there's about 10% of stuff. But I guess for us, auctions are important because that's where we get a lot of our really expensive stuff. Things that we buy for maybe it's $50, but then we might sell for, it's $900. It's more of a gamble,
Yeah. So I tried going to an auction once. I've only been to one auction out here, and it was kind of brutal. Like, it wasn't organized enough for me. I went there, it was outdoors, so the weather already can play a huge part. It could be too hot or windy or snowing or whatever. And the other thing was, like, they had so much stuff. It takes them like 12 hours to go through it, and there's not a logical order. They just kind of look at a big lot and auction it, and if it's got some tools in it, everyone goes crazy and pays way too much for tools.
Yep.
Or some guns or a car or something. And then there's other items that by the end of the day, everyone's tired and they're just kind of giving them away. And I just couldn't deal with it. It was like too much. I didn't want to give up a Saturday. So what's your auction situation look like? And how's it work for you?
Something we've learned is auctions are run by, one man, and it seems to always be a man, and he's the auctioneer, and he has a personality, and that's what the personality is of the auction is. So some of them are very fast and efficient, and then some of them are very slow and very disorganized. So we've learned in our local area, they normally have them every couple weeks, and we know the good guys to go to. And part of it is, the thing about an auction is having endurance. I mean, I know that's probably uncomfortable, but that's probably that's part of it. We get some of our best stuff at the end because at least half the people are gone, and then, the other 25% have already spent all their cash for the night, and then we just clean up at the end and get all kinds of crazy kooky stuff. And
now your auctions sound a little bit more civilized than mine. Like I've heard you say before that it's like a date night for you guys to go.
True. Yeah, they're normally the ones we go to. It's actually in a building, and they have like a little, I don't know, like a snack bar. It's like going to the baseball game or something, and it starts at like 6 o'clock and it goes to about 10 o'clock, and there are chairs, and it's comfortable. But I have been to the kind where, some guy dies, they have a big auction at the guy's house, and they're just selling everything inside the house, and there's stuff strewn out on a lawn, and they sell his car, and and those can be very hot depending on if it's in the middle of the summertime. So I think it just depends on what kind of auction you go to.
Right. So it seems for both of us, auctions don't represent a significant amount of our eBay inventory. I've never bought anything. It sounds like you only have a few high-end items that you get occasionally.
Yeah. Well, we could either hide items or, like as you said, we will buy like a pallet of stuff or like big, huge cases of things, and then you come home and kind of open them up and just see what kind of goods are in there. But yeah, auctions are not the best place because you do have to put some cash up front. So why don't we talk about, let's do thrift stores real quick. I mean, those I think are the easiest things and where most eBayers start. You go to a Goodwill or Salvation Army because they're everywhere. And, those are, again, a great place where I started. I just find like those places are becoming really popular and they get shopped really quickly and their prices actually aren't that good these days,
That has exactly been the experience I've been having at thrift stores. In fact, occasionally Wendy and I will jump in the car. We'll go to a town. I want to say a nearby town, but nothing's near me. I'm in the middle of nowhere. But, we'll go to a few hundred miles and we hit up 10 thrift stores. And I'll spend a fortune. I'll spend like $400, getting some inventory for eBay. And it will turn some okay money. That $400 might turn into, $4,000 in merchandise, but none of it sells that quickly. None of it is in great shape.
Right.
I paid, where I'm used to paying $1 or $2 for items at yard sales. Now I'm paying $5 to $10 for items. So it's a lot more investment and time, and there's usually no haggling.
Right.
And it's hard. So I'll still go to thrift stores when I'm in a big city, and I'll hit a few of them. Goodwills are so great, but when I'm paying like $6 for a pair of pants, like they better be pretty special pants, maybe with tags or something.
I mean, I find that Goodwills are basically the place where people go to shop for clothes instead of them going to, I don't know what kind of clothing stores there are, a Foley's or
I have no idea what stores are in
all these like a regional
JCPenney. I don't know where people
like
go.
JCPenney. I think instead of people going there, they just go to Goodwill because basically you get the same kind of clothes and you get them a lot cheaper. But for a seller, it's too expensive. I find that the thrift stores that we still love are like the small church thrift stores, It's like either attached to a church or got a church, it's named to it. So where all the money that gets, bought there gets given to the church. And I love it. You go in there, stuff is just piled up. It's real junky. Very often they'll have a bag, a time where they give you a bag and you can fill it up for $5 or $10. Those are the ones we love, and we find quite a good stuff there.
Yeah, I love Bag Day, and we have a local thrift store that does a bag week. Every third week, they do Bag Week, and that is pretty awesome. And you see their inventory dwindle from that.
Right. Because, and they have to do that because they get so much stuff. Like our local thrift store, they have a Bag Day every single day where for $5 you can fill up a garbage bag full of stuff. Because when you park in the back, people are just dumping stuff off there every night. I mean, couches, clothes, and they can't push it out the front door fast enough. And it's great for us,
Yeah, I find that the thrift store that I'm looking for, if I were just cruising towns, trying to figure out of these like thrift stores they have, which are the good ones, I would look in the back and see if there's a pile of crap back there. If they got a dumpster like full of inkjet printers, which they all seem to have here, and old fax machines and TVs and all this stuff just piled up in back. That's probably a good thrift store because they're just throwing stuff out. Like, they can't even deal with how much they have coming in.
Yeah, and plus too, I find like thrift stores are interesting because it's a challenge for us to find a value in the parts of that store that other people don't see. A lot of people, they go to the obvious places. They go to where the shirts are or the nice coats or the shoes. It's interesting to go to the corner where there's like household goods or like a big box of chargers or wires. And it's interesting to go in there because that's the stuff that's really cheap because no one's picking it up. And it's interesting to go and see if any of that stuff is worth anything. And we've done pretty good in those kind of areas.
So, Jay, when you walk into a thrift store, what do you go for? Like, what section is your first direction you want to check out?
Number one is shoes. You go back there and you might get lucky to find like a pair of boots or wingtips, like the old kind from like the 60s. But again, you know, those places are getting pretty smart, and they put high prices on them. Go.
Now, I know you and I both have this problem, and it's kind of embarrassing. I think I learned it from you, but I know a lot about women's shoes, and
yeah.
I know that you told me in your early days of thrifting, you'd stop off at you know thrift stores and like load up on women's shoes, and you'd be by yourself, this guy buying a bunch of women's shoes. And I have had that same thing happen to me. And I'll often I'll ask Winnie, do you like those mules? You know, are those slingbacks? You know, I'll actually start using all these terms. And most women don't even know these terms as far as from the ones I've talked to.
I was pretty embarrassed by that at first, but I've kind of learned that there's a lot of people who sell, I guess, either at flea markets or thrift stores. On eBay that go to a thrift store. So I think the people who work there are pretty smart about I go and we might get a cartload of stuff, which is much more than people normally do, and they know the deal. You know, they know we're selling.
I don't know. I always have that. Well, there's two comments I have here. I always have that thing in my head, everyone here is buying for eBay, right? For some reason, I always have that feeling, but I don't think that's the case.
Right.
And then the other thing I've had is I was at a church sale. It was like a Saturday church sale. And the church sales are great, just like you said. This wasn't a thrift store. This was just a yard sale church sale, which is really the ultimate for me in yard sales, this will be a good transition to yard sales.
Yep.
But I was buying all this stuff. I was loading up bags of clothing. And there were a bunch of people kind of gathered around me waiting to check out. So they were looking at what I bought. And I had all these cashmere sweaters and great wool, Australian wool and, Scottish wool and all this nice Shetland stuff. And they're looking at each item. They're like, ooh, what a find, right? And of course, I'm up at 7 in the morning on a Saturday, getting all this crap. And then they get to the women's shoes at the bottom of my bag, and they're like, I've been busted a few times on the women's shoes, and usually if my partner's with me, I'll have her carry them around because I just don't want to deal with, the misinterpretation of who I am.
Yep.
But I buy the shoes too because shoes are really where the value's at. Yep. I mean, no one is going to sell you a pair of shoes for a lot of money, and everyone on eBay is willing to pay at least $30 for a pair of shoes, assuming they're not trashed. So.
I mean, why don't we just be clear here? I think the way eBay works for us is that we look to make about 30 times what we spend. So, or 20 times. So if I spend a couple dollars, I want to make $30 to $40 on it. So that's why it's tough when I'm, if they want me to pay $6, $7, $8 for an item, it's tough to only make $30 on that. Because if I'm having to pay eBay fees and PayPal fees, that's not really a good turnaround.
Yeah. I know just what you mean. Yeah, I like to say a minimum of 10 times. If I don't think I can get it 10 times what I'm paying, I'm not going to bother. And it makes the math easy. You just add a zero. If you pay $1, it better be worth 10. But usually it's 30 times, like you say, for most items. And
that is
that's really.
I mean, I think that is crazy to talk about. I mean, what business has that kind of a profit? I mean, it's
most retail is talking about 40%.
Right.
Yep. So they'll buy something for $1 and sell it for $1.40.
Right.
And we're saying, no, if I buy $1, I want $30 back on it.
But that's kind of how it works, because really we've kind of broken it down. It takes us basically about 15 to 20 minutes to take an item and to take pictures of it, describe it, list it, store it, So if I don't make more than $10 or $20 on it, it really isn't worth it.
And there's a risk. I mean, when some of these items you're selling, if you're selling a $15 item, there's a risk now. Even if you can shoot it fast and describe it quickly and get the listing up and it sells, a customer could have a question about it. That takes some time to answer.
Yep.
There could be a problem with the item later on, which means now you are potentially getting negative feedback for a $15 item.
Yep.
So there's risk in messing with the real small stuff. So we like to keep it over 32 for anything we list.
Yep. All right. Well, let's talk about yard sales, because that's really important for us, and that's something we learned from you guys. I think it was about a year ago. We visited you guys. And we were still mainly doing thrift stores and auctions. and you guys were starting to do yard sales, and you took us around to your neighborhood and buying stuff, and we realized how much awesome stuff there was at these yard sales. And yard sales are the best because it's basically stuff people are just getting rid of, so you're getting it for pennies on the dollar. And so
yeah. So I do like to hit yard sales. I usually get up early on Friday. I actually find Fridays are often better because you're not competing with people who have jobs that might be weekend yard salers.
Yeah.
And I like to, I'm so serious about yard sales now after spending a year doing this that Wendy and I will sometimes drive to a nearby town, stay at a friend's house or use Airbnb or something and crash Thursday night in town to wake up early Friday and hit the sales all day. And if it's a good town with some good restaurants and stuff, we'll stay overnight Friday, hit the sales on Saturday.
Yep.
Do that for a few hours. There's only 2 or 3 good yard sale hour windows before things are getting picked over.
Yep.
And then, our whole trip will be paid for, at least sort of paid in advance or paid later from doing these yard sales, and we'll still make our regular income on top of that. So it's really been in our best interest to drive a few hundred miles to a bigger city and just hit those sales Friday, Saturday.
How do you find all those sales? Like online or the paper?
Well, it depends on the city. So I live in a small town, and even though it's small, there's still thousands of people, and there's a strong yard sale culture. So sales here go most of the year, about 9 months of the year, and I'll use the local papers and look it up. So I have like subscriptions to both papers, and I map out all the addresses, and then I just use my phone to kind of navigate. But when I go to a bigger city, I use an application called Yard Sale Mapper. Have you been using that one?
Nope, I haven't. Just mainly because around where I live, like outside of an urban area, I just find people aren't really online, so it wouldn't be popping up.
Right. So what I found with Yard Sale Mapper is it's great because now all of a sudden you go to a large city with maybe, 500,000 people or more.
Right.
And you got 60 to 90 sales per day on a weekend.
Yeah.
And you got to decide, well, what part of the city am I going to work? Because it's pretty easy to go from a nice neighborhood into a rough one where you're looking at baby clothes and car seats and
a VHS tapes.
And all sorts of stuff you don't want. And then you get into a better neighborhood and it's like, oh, here's a vintage, hunting horn. Yep. That's what I'm looking for. Yep. So we have a thing, Wendy and I have a thing we do, and we have all this terminology, and I want to share some of that because maybe you have some of these, I don't know if you use them, Jay, but we have a term for a yard sale that happens every week because there are those people who just set up the same tables or even just lift a tarp off and it's a yard sale. Right. And it's the same one that was there the week before.
Yep.
And we call them repeat offenders.
Yep.
and we have to look out for them because you're wasting your time. You drive off if you forget that there's a repeat offender in your neighborhood. You might go driving off towards a repeat offender and missing a great sale that's going on.
And normally that stuff is the junkiest stuff. It's stuff no one wants, and they just it's just stuff that would just be in their a yard, all the time anyway. They just happen to have a place where people can buy it. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're the worst. And the repeat offenders usually have high prices.
Yeah.
They want to negotiate. They're just out there for retirement's sake. This is just their way of hanging out.
Yep.
It's like a fishing lure to pull you in.
And real quick, those are normally the people when you ask about the price and they give you a high price, and if you give them a strange look, they'll say, well, I looked it up on eBay and it sells for $100. And then I'm always like, well, this isn't eBay, you're selling it to me right here. So
yeah, you got to do the work to get that price.
Okay.
So we have another type that comes up, and these types of sales are the type where you're driving around and all of a sudden there's a yard sale that wasn't listed. There's like a sign out that wasn't listed. So we call those pop-ups. So you're driving the streets and you have these sales in mind. You've already looked up in the paper or through your yard sale mapper, but then there's a sign on a telephone pole and you make a hard right and, you're flying into their driveway. And so those are pop-ups, the random ones that just someone decided to throw down and have a yard sale without any advance notification.
Yep.
And those are really interesting to me. I like the pop-ups quite a bit because usually it's someone who's got to get the hell out of town.
Yep.
Pop-ups are often like, this is where you often get an obituary situation where someone has died, like a parent has died. The kids show up. They came in the middle of the week and didn't have time to get into the paper listings, and they just got to empty the house. So you can do really well if you time a pop-up right. I've
done that. Yeah, I mean, and plus we buy stuff for ourselves too. I remember we drove by a pop-up once, and we ended up buying basically a whole pantry of canned goods. So we went home with boxes full of canned food for, I don't know, $5 or something because they didn't want it, you know? It's great.
Yeah, they got to empty out. And pop-ups are also people at the beginning of the month. I see a lot more pop-ups because people are trying to get out of their apartment and they haven't cleaned it and they're just like, come in, take it, you know? Yeah, these people don't want to negotiate at all. They get it out of here. So there's a third type of sale that comes up a lot, and this type of sale is no good. This is another, like the repeat offender, and I call this the parasite. Have you seen these before?
Tell me.
All right, so the parasite sale is where there's already a yard sale, but the neighbor decides to jump in on it. And they open up their garage, and they're out there like setting up tables, and they didn't list. And I don't mean that's like in a block sale kind of sense. The parasites will even come in a form where you're at a yard sale and a truck pulls up and it's got all this crap in the back and they're just trying to glob on to someone who already has the traffic of a yard sale.
Yeah, I've seen those.
So the parasites are usually a little more professional, like they're waiting for something to glom onto. And it's really not so different than parasites in the real world. And occasionally you'll do okay at them, but I find them sort of a long shot. It's really about the pop-ups and the people who have properly listed. So let's trying to avoid the parasites.
So let's kind of, we're at about 20 minutes or so. Let's kind of get to some of our suggestions here. I mean, number one, yard sales, I think, have become our favorite just because you normally buy things for, it's 50 cents or $1, and you end up selling them for, it's $40 or more than that. So it's always a great place to find good deals. I think the other thing is that we suggest, what I've always learned is to bring small bills. So we always hit the bank on a Thursday, and I'll get like $100 in $1 bills because none of those places is want to break a 20. You know, it's always a pain in the ass. And if I'm trying to get something for a dollar, I don't just want to pop a $20 bill out. So that's what we always do.
Yeah, I even find that most yard sales are so unprepared with having correct change that I'll bring extra and be like, hey, I can give you some 5s. I can give you some 10s. and I actually usually don't do too much in singles because I'm buying enough quantity from every sale that I don't need the singles as much as I need 5s and 10s.
Well, let's talk about that real quick because you guys also taught us this, where don't you go and you and Wendy kind of grab a big pile of stuff, and then instead of like trying to negotiate on each piece, you just kind of give a price for everything, and it kind of confuses them, and they're just like put a really low price on the whole lot, right?
Yeah, we've tried to do that bundling, and it sometimes works. We always bring our own bags just to make it easy to pick stuff up. We load them up, and then we'll go over to the person and be like, all right, how much for all of this? And sometimes they want to really go through everything, but I'll tell you, it's usually not in their best interest because even if they charge us $1 for every item, we're offering roughly that, you know, and they didn't have to take that time. But most people are a little reluctant to bundle. A lot of people are kind of weird about us just having our own bags because they think we're just going to like walk off with it. So we have to tell them, no, we're going to, you know, we're just putting it here and we'll give it to you. But we just don't want to leave stuff on the tables that looks promising so the next person will grab it. And we'll often kind of look over when we're trying to bid for prices. We're also looking at the item a little more closely then, so we can kind of scan it for damage. Yeah,
I guess it just depends on what kind of a yard sale it is. I mean, there's some people that are just trying to spring clean and they're just trying to get stuff out of there. Then there are some people who, they're more like they're selling things that are important to them, you know, and they really just want to like get a price for each piece. So I guess it's different.
So the bundling thing, it sort of works for us a little bit, but most people not really. It just depends how much they want to get it out. But we have 2 other negotiating techniques we use, and I think that you guys probably know these a little bit too. But I do good cop, bad cop with Wendy, where she's the bad cop. She's always the bad cop. And I'll go to buy something like a pair of pliers, and she'll say, you're not buying that. You have 10 pairs of pliers. Right. And so immediately the person running the yard sale looks at the two of us and is like, well, I'll give you a better price.
There you go.
And then finally we have the don't touch. If there's something that's a little pricey, I won't touch it.
Yep.
Like I'll just I'll actually leave the yard sale, like start walking away, and I'll turn around over my shoulder and look at the person running the yard sale and say, how much for that item? And I'm like 15 feet away from it, not touching it. I think that makes a big difference on negotiating, because then they see that you are leaving. Like this is not something that you were going to pay top dollar for.
Right.
So it's easy to get a little bit of a price drop. And I've used that quite a bit on an item that was, 2 or 3 times that I wanted to pay. And they'll usually work with you if they, if they have the drive to move it.
I also have a technique, and, these aren't like things to trick people. It's just ways to communicate with people. And this works for me at flea markets and at yard sales. If someone is like selling things that's important to them or that they think is really cool, I'll often just ask them about the item, and I'll compliment them, say what a cool piece it is. I'll ask them about the history. They'll normally have a story, and I'll just say how much I really like it, and then I'll ask them how much it is, and they'll normally give me a pretty high price that it's want to pay. And then I just put it down, and I just kind of be quiet, and I look at it, and I just let that silence hang there. And usually the person realizes, that I appreciate the item and they want me to have it, and they're willing to come down on the price. And that's...
Yeah, that reminds me of a very similar technique, and it's just a little more reversing. It's just like a reversal of what you're saying. So instead of asking the person a lot about it, so I'll give you an example. We went to a yard sale, and they had a bunch of old school film development equipment. So for developing your own photos on glossy paper in a dark room. And that stuff is worth a lot. That's actually, camera equipment is worth so much on eBay.
Yeah.
And so I was asking about it and realized that the person wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate it. So instead of, continuing to just go into what it does, just say, what, I'm a film student, or I'm a photographer and I needed this equipment that I can use it. But, I'm in school and I got expenses, and usually like, you'll just see them hand you the box. It's just like, oh, you should have this, know? Because the really good yard sales are going to come from wealthier homes. And these people don't even need the money.
Right.
They're out there just to clean up their house. So, that technique can work. And that we've used that from time to time. If people have like great sewing equipment or something, we'll be like, oh, I like to do that. I want to get into making doilies at home,
Cool.
So, all right. Well, I think that's a nice little summary of where to buy. Is there anything else you want to add to this episode, Jay?
No. But so let's talk about, what are we going to talk about in episode 3?
Let's take a look at EP3. All right, so next episode we're going to talk about what we won't sell on eBay.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
And I know you have a completely different list than me about that. We have different different interests in what we're selling entirely. So.
Absolutely. Okay. Cool. Good show, Mike.
All right. Bye.
Bye.